Hey friends, before we get started, I wanted to tell you about another podcast I'm on. If you're a longtime listener, you know our friends at Castalia Cocktails are a great place to go for a top quality, crafted, thought about drink to enjoy. But what's behind that? Well, my friend Dr. Kevin Peterson has a new podcast called Cocktail Sense, where we together dive into that and talk about how your favorite cocktails come together. We get into the science and art of balance and flavor on Cocktail Sense and have some fun along the way, too. So check out Cocktail Sense in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. And let's get started with today's show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very snowy Friday, January 19th, 2024 on your Daily Detroit. I am Jer and joining me on the line is...
Devon O'Reilly. Yeah, I feel like no matter when you listen to this over the next few days, it's snowy day will apply.
We just got walloped this week, man. Winter
decided it's going to really show itself, which, I mean, what are you going to say? Middle of January to late January, this is when we take our pounding from Mother Nature and snow. So it is what it is, right?
Right. Well, I did brave the snow and get out to an event this week. Visit Detroit had their annual meeting, and at that meeting spoke both Mike Tirico, longtime sportscaster, now for NBC, and NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. Here's the thing, Devon. Me and Fletcher Sharp, we got to talk to Mike Tirico for a bit.
That's awesome. Tirico's a Michigan guy, right?
Oh, yeah. Stays in the area, and his family's here. So I think he brings a unique perspective to things. Why don't we hop into that conversation?
All right.
So how does it feel for you to be in a situation where you had season tickets up there? I heard what you were talking about, being part of this region and then seeing this playoff run and then the NFL draft. I mean, it came up all roses for Detroit as far as an experience.
It's a great year for sure. You know, we, through our job, stay neutral. All 32 teams at some point will be their home team announcer. So we always try to be neutral about it. But it is very fortunate for me to have a personal understanding of what the fans here have endured because of that, what it means to them. This has been a great run through the season, through the end of last season, and to get not one but two home playoff games really sets the table for what I think is going to be awesome in the spring when the draft is here. The draft is such a cool event. It's the one time the whole league comes together and all 32 fan bases are focused on the same place, not on their team or something else going on. So it's a unique event, and I think this is a great opportunity for people from around the country firsthand to see how good Detroit is.
As someone who's now lived in the Ann Arbor area for about 25 or so years, you kind of touched on how the state is a football state. Michigan's a really big football state. How the Lions doing well, Michigan football doing well, the draft coming here. Can you touch on how you think it means to someone who's from here?
I think Detroit has worn many nicknames over the years. It certainly is Hockey Town. Detroit basketball resonates with so many folks over the years. I think we all remember the enjoyment of watching the Tigers go from 120 losses a couple of years later to the World Series and what it was like to be across the street from where we are now at Comerica Park, watching that success. But I think, as with most Midwest cities, it's a football town, right? Because of these games, the legacies of the Packers and the Bears and the Vikings and the rivalries with the Buckeyes and the Boilermakers and the Big Ten teams and obviously interstate with Michigan State and Michigan, they just define fall weekends in these parts. So football success trumps, to me, the success in all the other sports. And I watched the Eagles win the Super Bowl a couple of years ago and said, you know what, if Detroit ever had a Super Bowl victory in a parade, it would be the one thing that could rival Philadelphia, because the Eagles fans have waited since 1960. So I look forward to seeing that day someday, but I think it really does connect with the fans, and their spirit is very obvious on a day-in, day-out basis around this team, and the draft as well.
You travel the country. What has the conversation and how has the conversation of Detroit evolved, over the years? Because I mean, we've both been around a minute. You've been around a little bit longer, but we've both been around a minute. We've both seen times that have not been so great talking about Detroit. How's that conversation evolved?
Yeah, I think there are several downtowns around the country that have had a renaissance, a turnaround, and this is right at the top of them, right? And look, let's not pretend for a second that everything's perfect here, right? There's still a lot of things that need to improve, but things have been put in place to help this area grow and succeed. And I think everyone has experienced that firsthand. And nationally, when people interact with folks from Detroit or the opportunity to come here, they're seeing that firsthand. I've seen it with a lot of the folks who come for the Rocket Mortgage Golf Classic. They come from all over the country, cover the PGA Tour. They go, wait, Detroit's pretty cool. What a nice place. So, yeah, there are still things to do. And we haven't hit the place where we say, yeah, Detroit's great, everything's perfect. But a lot of folks have realized where the city was and where it is now. And full credit to that goes to leadership, mayor, city council, the businesses, Dan Gilbert for his investments downtown. But really, a lot of credit has to go to the teams as well. Building of Comerica Park, opening of Ford Field, Little Caesars Arena, concerts, sporting events. That's 400 plus times a year. People from our region and people from outside the state come here and see Detroit, and they see a pretty thriving and vibrant city. So it's all contributed to that, and the draft is an opportunity for the entire NFL fan base to see that.
So do you have any concerns about the weather? It seems like there's a plan, but are you feeling good about it?
Yeah, the weather is always an issue with any kind of an event in the city in April that's on the Great Lakes, right? But this draft will be in Green Bay, was in Philadelphia, was in Chicago twice. So we know that the weather isn't always going to be perfect in late April. Maybe we get lucky and we get a couple of tremendous days and the city shines, right? We all know that there's been opening days when it's been 70 and sunny, and there have been opening days when it's been 33 and mix of rain and snow, like the opening day at Comerica Park when they played Seattle back in 2000. So I think anything can happen, but I think the city's pretty well prepared, and the planners too. They know how to do this event in bad weather. We've seen terrible weather at a couple of the drafts, so it doesn't dampen, it just adjusts what is ahead for the folks who come to the event.
If it's my experience, Detroiters just gear up for it. We're just ready for it. It gets us even more pumped if the weather's bad.
We see that in Detroit. We see that in Buffalo, the National Football League. When it comes to the NFL, people know, okay, we'll just kind of get through it. I remember in Kansas City last week when we were working a game where the feels like temperature was 27 below, and the lower bowl beneath us was full of fans. So the fans of the National Football League have a great energy for the product, a great desire to be around it. So I think we'll have, no matter what the weather, a tremendous turnout and a great experience on draft weekend.
And if there's anything you want to say to somebody thinking about coming to Detroit, what would you tell them?
Get here. I mean, there's so many things, from restaurants to music to bars to clubs to culture to history, that you can see in this city. And, in a time and a space where downtowns around the country are being re-energized, revitalized, Detroit's right there at the front and center of it. I know that for the, quote, foodies, people who love great restaurants, this has become a great destination because of the great chefs who've come here to make it special. So this is a city you need to find out about, whether it's draft or a Lions game or something else. Come here and check it out, because you will not be disappointed.
So, Devon, one thing I walked away with this meeting is that it seems like, in a similar way to the Super Bowl, it's a little bit different, but similar. There is a lot of alignment towards this NFL draft that's coming up in April. I can't help but think about the economic part of this. And, people will question economic numbers and all that other stuff. But when it comes to this NFL playoff game, this extra playoff game, the folks over at Visit Detroit, Chris Moyer, is saying that there is a $20 million direct economic impact. And what I mean by that is that's the number they came up with for people spending on parking. They're saying that there's a 25% bump in hotel reservations, which is great for this time of year, especially Sands Auto Show. This is economically a pretty big deal. I mean, it also means that in the future, going to a Lions game is going to be more expensive, and yes, somehow parking will probably get more expensive too, but this is good news for the bars and everyone else involved in hospitality, especially, kind of a surprise,
Yeah, great news for downtown. I mean, I feel like we've come so far. I mean, the Super Bowl seems like ages ago, and I've always felt we just weren't there in 2006 to really put our best foot forward. And so this really is not a redo, but another opportunity to show how far we've come, to show that we are a world-class city. And I have all the confidence that we're going to do it. I mean, if nothing else, the fans here are going to be incredible. A lot of people say it's actually going to be a bigger potential economic boom than the Super Bowl, because it's more days. People are in town for longer. The draft itself carries on over 4 days. I think that we're ready. The other thing to think about is also we have used, and again, we can't shout out Chris and Visit Detroit too much, right? But the thing that we've used is we've actually used the draft years ago to try and justify the need for additional hotel rooms. And so getting the draft was kind of the carrot that we were able to then say, all right, we're getting this huge event. There's going to be thousands of people coming downtown. We need to just go warp speed on getting new hotels built, new hotel rooms online. And we've done that. And so that wouldn't have happened if the draft wasn't coming. And then I think because of the draft, and if it's successful, we'll see other opportunities like more NCAA tournament opportunities. We could see, maybe an NBA or an NHL All-Star game. So I think this is going to really kick off to Detroit being a place that can host pretty much the largest sporting event. And then just to your point about the economic impact, the $20 million, you got to believe that number, because when you look at the ticket prices, it's incredible, Jer. I know you've looked at this and people have been sharing this around. Something like, Baltimore on the low end, I think their average ticket was going for like $140. You've got the Lions, which, saying this now, like $1,100 resale value. I mean, it's just insane how passionate, how ready we are for this. So absolutely, people are ready to come here to Detroit to spend their money, to cheer on the Lions. And money does not seem to be an object here.
One thing that got asked of Goodell was the possibility of bringing the Super Bowl back here. And he said, well, let's get through the draft and then we can think about things. But it does remind you that it's been a long time since the Super Bowl's been here. And I don't think it's insane that would come here in the next 10 years.
Certainly, you're going to have a faction of people kind of on the inside of the NFL who want to have it in a warm climate. That's why they tend to grant it to places like Vegas and New Orleans and Tampa and LA a lot, and Houston, because they're in warmer climates. And It's February in Detroit. But, we've seen it. They've done it in Minnesota. They've obviously done it in Detroit. Detroit was one of kind of the first experiments in a cold weather city. So I certainly think it could work. I think that, Goodell is rightfully playing coy because they don't make those decisions yet. And I'm sure other teams are vying for it. But I think we're going to put on a really great show at the draft. And it's going to kind of really open people's eyes at, let's say, that the NFL, that we can do this.
I think that it would require some sort of major signature hat hanging project or something involving the team or the stadium. There'd have to be something kind of like as a hook in order to be able to push that over the line,
I agree with you, but I would argue that those things are already happening, and that's just these massive economic development projects. Everything from the University of Michigan Innovation Center, Michigan Central, the Hudson's Tower, or whatever we're going to call that. The new center, you can't overlook the $3 billion on the Boulevard with MSU and the Pistons and Gores and Henry Ford. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like those things in and of themselves are going to just be these massive economic development projects that will even make this area more attractive and vibrant.
Let's get into stories because, yes, there have been things happening in this deep winter week. And one of them that is breaking as we are recording this is that Ford is going to push 1,400 workers towards retirement or to other facilities, or, basically cut some jobs for the F-150 Lightning plant in Dearborn. About half of them are actually going to make a transition over to Michigan Assembly, where they'll be adding a third crew to increase production of the Bronco and Ranger. That's good news that a good number of them will find a new place to go. But this is tied to F-150 Lightning production. And it seems like we're continuing to see adjustments when it comes to EVs.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those forever topics right now. And I know you've had some experts on, Jer, in the last few weeks. My 2 cents is just to reiterate what people have kind of said, and that's that the appetite for EVs has just not shown to be at the same level as the major autos are producing them at. And, there's a little bit of kind of sentiment from the public that is being pushed down their throat. So this isn't surprising news that Ford really doubled down on the EV Lightning early on. And I don't have the numbers. I do think that it has been relatively successful as EVs go. I think they've done a good job selling them, but my guess is they produce so many of them up front, and there's just not the need for that continued level of production because the demand isn't there. So it's tough to hear. Hope that, again, like you said, not all of them are just layoffs. Some of them will just be shifted to other plants. But yeah, I don't think this is the last of this type of news that we hear.
Yeah, just so you know, the production's being chopped from 3,200 in half to 1,600 per week, and they're going to be taking out 2 different trim levels. So that is a step back, to say the least. And, it's interesting because the Lightning is a beast of a truck.
I haven't had the privilege of driving it yet, but I know people who have, and there's nothing but good things to say about it. Again, the Lightning, I don't think anybody would say has been some kind of a failure. I mean, it's not like the Cybertruck, which I think is a failure. it has been somewhat successful and has proved that you can electrify a heavy duty truck like that. So, I mean, there has been some success to it. It's just still about building that mass adoption, and we're just not there yet.
Kind of related to Ford, one thing I noticed while I was out and about at the Henry Ford that I didn't mention on the air. Oh my gosh, that design center they're building across from the Henry Ford is gigungous, and it's cool looking, but when you walk out of the main theater of the Henry Ford, it's a whole different vibe down that street now.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, Jer. And we get full disclosure, we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but I can certainly talk about it because it's something that, again, is near and dear to my heart, given where it's at. I could walk to this, and it's really exciting that this is happening. And everything I've talked to, and this is not insider Devon. I'm not saying I have necessarily any updated insider information, but I have had kind of casual conversations with folks at Ford Land, some folks at Ford. And the idea is for this massive campus to really have a forward-facing element. So what I think you could end up seeing are potentially retail, yoga studios, hopefully bars and restaurants, cafes.
Really?
I think you're actually going to see some commercial tenants on the main floor of this, which makes sense because you have all these people who are visiting the Henry Ford in Greenfield Village. So I've heard that. I haven't gotten an update on that, but I think that would be awesome, and selfishly it'd be really cool for me.
Well, the city of Dearborn seems to always be trying to do something to keep people there.
We do a great job. That's why they've kept me.
Now, a little bit of not so great news that came through our social media is that the Detroit Beer Exchange in downtown Detroit off of Washington Boulevard, literally across the street from Le Supreme, and all of the new concepts, because there's actually like even more concepts. The other concepts are ready to go in that building. And so it's definitely something I want to check out. But across the street, Detroit Beer Exchange, the pizza place attached to it, the event space downstairs, which engineer Randy really liked, is no longer for this world. They did not make it.
Yeah. Well, Jer, sometimes, when this happens, I always hate to see it. Sometimes I understand it. Sometimes I kind of feel like, things could have been done a different way. This is one of those where I just don't think that the operators really got what they were doing, and they never really went full bore. And what I mean by that is something you and I, Jer, talk about a lot. That's consistency. Consistency of being open, consistency of hours. That is important. And the beer exchange was wildly inconsistent. I've been there a handful of times. I've also tried to go there a handful of times on what would seem like a normal time, a Friday evening, a Thursday evening, nighttime, Saturday during the day. Like, it just was never open. And then kind of it was. And I totally understand that that's a huge space. I mean, there's a lot of square footage there. So there's a lot of overhead there. But at the same time, I don't feel like they ever really took the time to kind of see it through and build that kind of customer base. And now with Washington Boulevard, getting some investment with the book tower, with what they're doing to make it more walkable. Personally, I think they kind of missed their chance. I think they could have been successful if they would have waited it out a little bit. But I'm also hoping that something goes in there that will use the bones of that space, because there's really good bones. Obviously, it would be a great spot for potentially an outpost of maybe a local brewery or, some kind of a gastropub type of concept. I'm hoping. I have nothing to say that that's going to happen, but that's what I'm hoping for.
I feel like there should be a meme of like, you get an Eastern Market Brewery, you get an Ferndale Project, because it's like,
Dane
Dane
can only do so much.
I am not saying that that's the case, but in my head, my first thought was, will he do one there too? Like every single space, I'm like, because he's doing that founder spot as well. So,
right.
Yeah, very aggressive. But for me, I can't pocket check them and know their business, but I do think it's important to be a regional destination. And I think it's important to have the marketing behind that. And that's one gap that I sometimes see with some of these things is that, there's just only so much market, especially for such a huge space. If you haven't been by there, it's a big space. And breaking out in a regional way is really hard. I mean, I think about the conversation that we had about Firebird Tavern and how much work those guys do for wedding receptions and everything else. They're out at conferences and stuff. I'm not saying that didn't happen, but it's a real push.
Exactly. I'm following that. I mean, honestly, God, Jerry, full disclosure, not surprising. I walk by there all the time just in a given week. So I'm seeing what they're doing. And towards the end, they did put up signs to kind of say, oh, this is an event space. But to me, it was kind of too little too late. And just putting a sign on your window or maybe changing what it says on your website was literally, too little too late.
Crain's Detroit Business is reporting that a project that a lot of people have been talking about, putting a movie theater, first-run movie theater, in the greater downtown Detroit area, that is on the back burner. According to them, this Emagine theater that was supposed to be a partnership with Big Sean, they're having trouble with the money part. It's now about a $35 million price tag on this one. And I know that they're still saying, hey, this is something that could happen. They're mentioning how a space didn't work out for Wayne State University that was tucked over by the freeway. This thing was announced in 2018, Devin. Do we put this in the basically Deadpool?
Yeah, I put this in the don't hold your breath. I think a couple of reasons. Financing on stuff like this is really tough to secure financing for a project like this. Big Sean has a lot of money, but, mostly I feel like that's a name. That's the way these projects go. It's not like Big Sean is personally financing this project. If he was, maybe it'd be different. Getting together the financing to put something like this together is tough. A location, you need a good sized location for this. And then the demand issue that we talked about is, we've had several potential iterations of a movie theater come up. And, I remember Alamo Drafthouse that was going to be on Woodward and MLK. Just didn't work out. I'm not sure the movie theater model is, I don't know, the revenue generating. I don't know the insides or, I'm not in the books, but I just feel like there's something there. It's tough.
Yeah, movie theaters, this isn't a Detroit thing. I mean, if this was to be built, I think it needed to be built in 2018, 2019. I wonder if just the idea of new movie theaters, unless it's a boutique thing, I wonder if that's just not a thing that's going to happen in the future.
I think you're absolutely right in the sense that this needed to happen in 2018 and 19 because by the time we got to COVID, it wasn't going to happen anymore. And so this needed to get shovels in the ground and the project underway, and then at least you could have completed it and saw it through. But the fact that it didn't get done, 4 or 5 years ago now, don't hold your breath. I'm not saying it won't happen, but not anytime soon.
Well, Devin O'Reilly, always good to talk to you. It is one of those weeks where we just didn't really get out to that much because, well, A, there's a ton of work to do, and B, it's been so very cold in Detroit.
I know, Jer, honest to God, the snow wasn't as bad as, the first couple days this week when I was downtown for work. I always go for at least kind of one little stroll around downtown while I'm grabbing a coffee or something. And I mean, I tried it and my ears started burning. So the cold to me is even worse than the snow, which hopefully we're past that level of cold. But yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough to be a man about town when it's so inhospitable.
One thing I did see, and I want to put a little tag in it for listeners, there were changes to the coffee shop downtown that's in the Capital One. Now, I haven't been able to go there yet. Have you?
I tried to walk over there, actually, on Tuesday, and they were closed. Again, one of those things where there's just a sign saying, sorry, we are temporarily closed.
The Verve, I think?
The Verve is what it's called.
All
which
right.
Again, I mean, what do you do, Jer? It's
I'm
tough
a child of
because
the 90s. The Verve has a very different meaning to me.
Oh, I know. Well, there was also, I don't want to get too deep in here, but there was the Verve and the Verve pipe, and even I always confuse those.
That's right. Well, Devin O'Reilly, so good to talk to you, man, and I can't wait for next week.
Great to talk to you, Jer. I hope everyone stays warm and safe this weekend. Go Lions. You didn't ask me, but I'm going to predict a win anyway. I'm going to go 28-20 Lions over the Bucs.
I'll double down on that. I'll take that. I think, I'm not counting my chickens before they're hatched, but I do think that the Lions have the ability to win this game. And what a wild time it would be to get into the NFC Championship. But I'm not looking too far ahead. We got to win this weekend. I'm excited. I'm still going to be on the edge of my seats until we get this in hand.
Absolutely. Looking forward to Sunday, and I know Ford Field will be absolutely raucous.
With that, I'm Jer Stays.
I'm Devin O'Reilly.
Thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around town.